Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic. Freshly revealed, we have the new Precons from Duskmourn, and today we're looking at Endless Punishment, the black and red Group Slug deck. While we've seen Group Slug style commanders before, we've never had a Precon dedicated to the archetype, dealing damage to everyone and punishing them for taking game actions, so this deck, to me, is exciting. And the box legend for the deck is Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, Duskmourn's main villain and the demonic entity responsible for the plane becoming a giant haunted house. He looks a little different here as he sheds and regenerates his form regularly as the house grows in power. This version is a 4-mana 4/4 Elder Demon, it has flying, and reads, Ward, pay 2 life. Whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, and draw a card. Simple enough, Valgavoth wants to be dealing some form of damage to each opponent on each of their turns, resulting in a constantly growing commander and a constant stream of card advantage. Immediately, this reads to me a lot like Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin. You want to be dealing consistent small damage to opponents on their turns, so punishing draw effects is highly recommended, along with anything that can simply ping opponents regularly. Valgavoth cares not how much damage is dealt, simply that it is dealt. This is classic Group Slug. Punish regular game actions like casting spells, tapping lands, or drawing cards for a death by 1,000 cut style approach to winning the game. And now, with Valgavoth, you can take that archetype and put a strong card draw engine at the lead that also is an evasive beater. It's very good. But Valgavoth isn't the only commander in the deck. We also have the new The Lord of Pain, a 5-mana 5/5 human assassin with menace that reads, Your opponents can't gain life. Love that line of text. Whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. The Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. It's appropriate that the Lord has menace because he is a menace, take it from me. I had the privilege of playing against the Lord of Pain a few times with MTG Mudsta, linked up top, and trust me, this guy is a nightmare to deal with. He's a different take on Group Slug. If Valgavoth wanted small, consistent damage over time, the Lord wants big bursts of damage, and wants to lean into a more huggy approach in enabling your opponents to cast bigger spells for bigger bursts of damage. And since the damage comes from the Lord of Pain, it's absolutely backbreaking when you can give him lifelink and let him go to town. 2 to 3 casts can swing life totals out of control. He's a lot like classic Kervek the Merciless, also in the base list, but costs 5 mana instead of 7. The difference is also that the Lord only deals damage to players where Kervek can pop anything with his damage. There is also one caveat with the Lord to be aware of, in that his ability is not optional. You have to point that damage at a player. Meaning, if you're in a one-on-one scenario and your opponent casts a spell, you're the only valid target for the Lord's ability. Meaning, you're in for a load of pain too. Hopefully that lifelink is paying off. Let's take a look at which of these commanders are better to build around and what cards we want to cut or add to tune it in a cohesive direction. If you're looking to pick up the cards to build this deck yourself, check out my sponsor Card Trader. Card Trader is one of the world's largest global networks on buying or selling cards. They make it easy to find cards at the cheapest prices from all around the world, in languages you're looking for and in the treatments that you're looking for. For 5% off your first order, use my promo code MECHANIC. Check out the link in the description for more. So which of these commanders makes for a better deck? Personally, I have fallen in love with the Lord of Pain. After getting my face smashed by it a few times, it's shown that it doesn't take a lot to get out ahead, and a few changes to the base Precon are a great way to take it to the next level. So let's pivot the deck a bit towards the Lord. But first, some of the new cards in the deck that are really interesting. New inclusions for this archetype, like Gleeful Arsonist, a nice scalable Punisher effect. This 3-mana 1/2 pings opponents equal to its power whenever they cast a non-creature spell, with Undying to help it stick around and boost its power. But that power and that pain scale with its power however it's increased. So slap some power boosting equipment on it and it's going to deal some real damage while also preventing opponents from casting spells that remove it. A Nettle Cyst or a Cranial Plating on it in a deck with some mana rocks or treasures, and someone's going to have to eat a massive beating in order to remove it. And you know your opponents wouldn't dare be the ones to pull that trigger themselves. In a group slug deck, which this absolutely is, it's a house. And how about Star Athlete, a 3-mana 3/2 with Menace that gives red a kind of enchantment removal. You see, on attack you get to choose any target non-land permanent, including enchantments, and have your opponent choose to take 5 more damage or sacrifice it. Is that Rhystic Study worth 5 damage every turn? Some folks will definitely say no. This trigger is an attack trigger too. There's no need for the star here to connect to get the effect. Additionally, there's nothing saying the defending player needs to control the permanent either. Attack opponent 1, try to blow up opponent 2's stuff. But on top of this, it has Blitz for 4 mana, turning it into a surprising one-time effect for 4 mana that cantrips when it dies. If you've got a red deck that has a weakness to specific permanents, the star is a great include. Now let's talk Suspended Sentence, a 4-mana instant that destroys a creature and loses its controller 3 life. That on its own would be decent, but there's more. Reminiscent of the verse cards from Strixhaven Commander, Suspended Sentence can be suspended for 2 mana and after 3 turns recasts itself and resuspends itself. It's the gift that keeps on coming back to annoy your opponents. This is an excellent early game investment of 2 mana, and in a lot of games, especially Precon games, can and will pop off at least 2 times. In more competitive games or faster metas, this may only fire off once, so there may be better options, but in slower, more casual games, this card does work. Lastly, there's Seance Board, a 2-mana mana rock that initially doesn't generate mana. But with Morbid, each turn a creature dies, you put a counter on it and it makes more and more mana. It's easy enough to either control when creatures die in an Aristocrat deck, or ensure creatures die on each opponent's turn with an Abyss-style effect like Call to the Grave, or even with some mild burn, to ensure this is making you 3 to 4 mana every turn reliably. Granted, the mana is only for instants, sorceries, demon, or spirit spells, but if you've got that saturation of spells or your commander is a demon or spirit, this is a must-have rock. It will naturally get counters through the course of a game, like Morbid Opportunist will draw you cards through the course of a game, so it's pretty painless to include in many decks. It gets even better if you can use some untap effects to make more and more and more mana. Any rock that turns out to be mana positive is pretty good in my book. Now if we're pivoting this deck to star the Lord of Pain, there are some great areas that we should really emphasize, first of which being life gain. I played against this Precon a few times, linked up top with Mudsta and friends, and the most backbreaking effect in the deck is giving the Lord lifelink. He deals the damage himself, so this is a way to put you way out of pace very fast. With Mask of Grizzlebrand, Witch's Clinic, and Basilisk Collar in the base list, adding a few more equipment that grant lifelink would be ideal. On the low budget side, Loxodon Warhammer is a classic and a great way to give the Lord lifelink and make him an even better attacker. While on the high budget side, Shadow Spear is a lower cost and just as efficient with a smaller power buff, but accomplishing the exact same thing. Both of these enable you to gain loads of life while dealing loads of damage every turn. My next ad would be one of my favorite cards, Descent into Avernus. The Lord is all about putting life total pressures on the table, and this is a single card that does it better than anything in the game. It also serves an important function in ensuring opponents can cast bigger and bigger spells too. The treasure ramp gets real fast. You ideally want your opponents casting maximum mana spells each turn so that you can throw around 6, 7, 8 damage and ideally gain that much life too. Along those same lines, we could make the deck closer to a group hug list where we want to give opponents the resources to hang themselves with, drawing them extra cards to proc Kettering Parasite, Fate Unraveler, and Spiteful Visions so they have more cards in hand to cast bigger spells. Duskmourn's Razorkin Needlehead or Underworld Dreams would fit right in with those previously mentioned effects, dealing damage on card draw, especially if we can ramp up the number of cards drawn every turn, achieving both effects, sustained damage over time and bursts of damage as players cast bigger spells. The Lord puts a clock on the game the moment he hits the table. Adding Coveted Jewel would be a great way to not only increase everyone's card draw, but also encourage opponents to attack each other no matter how much the Lord of Pain is the threat. It gives extra mana, too, to cast bigger spells with for bigger damage. It's literally everything we want. and classic Mana Flare gives everyone more mana for bigger and bigger spells. This is great group hug territory though. If the first spell someone casts with all their mana is removal for the Lord, well, be careful for the onslaught that may follow. Your opponents will be casting huge spells as much as you're enabling them to. And for the last few spots in the deck, I want huge spells of our own. X-cost spells that not only let the Lord throw damage around, but can end the game fast. Exsanguinate, Crackle with Power, or Torment of Hailfire let us pop off big spells, have the Lord punch the highest life total opponents for lethal or near lethal, then let the spell finish everyone off. If we're giving everyone boatloads of cards and mana, let's make sure we can take advantage of it more than anyone else can. In order to make room for some of these pieces, let's cut some of the cards that don't either make it easier for everyone to play big spells, or that punish players from a non-life total standpoint. And I want to begin by removing the aristocrat elements of the deck. This is not an aristocrat deck and doesn't need Blood Artist, Falconwrath Noble, or Bastion of Remembrance. Sure, creatures are always going to die, but these are not exploitable cards in this deck. They don't fuel any combos, and even if they act as another source of damage through the game, they do not make themselves necessary to the game plan. Then let's remove a few of the other legends in the deck, starting with Florian, Vuldar, and Sion. I like Florian a lot in a brew that makes better use of him. Ideally, you want to be dealing damage that you don't have to pay mana for to trigger him, and cast big spells in your second main phase that you search up with him. But with the Lord in the deck, your most reliable source of damage is casting big spells, leaving you with Florian as a way to make sure that you don't miss a land drop at best. Not worth the include. Then there's Kardur Doomscourge, another legend I like but not here. This isn't a list where the creatures dying in combat is going to matter, and if you've gained any life with a life-linked Lord, then you aren't going to be worried about being attacked. Kardur is always a fine card, but just never a good card to include in most lists. Then there's also the Lord of Pain's father figure, Kervek the Merciless. As mentioned earlier, Kervek can throw damage from spells anywhere, including at creatures, but he costs 2 more mana than your commander. I can't really see myself wanting to cast both. That's not bad, but it's not game-breaking either. It's fine, and for 7 mana, I want better than fine. I want amazing. Lastly, there's Rakdos. Poor Rakdos. The Lord of Riots meets the Lord of Pain and loses the battle, as Rakdos is great in any deck, but this one in my opinion. We don't have big colorless creatures to cast, and the most discount the Lord of Riots is going to give us on a single creature is maybe 4 mana. Again, good in other decks, but not this one. We want to sow some discord, and Rakdos loves that, but from a usability standpoint, it's just not enough for us. Then we'll remove the subpar draw spell Blood Pact. It's overcosted despite being an instant, and there may be one game in 100 where you get to off someone with the 2 points of targeted life loss, but we really have better options in the deck. And while I said I liked the Star Athlete, I don't think this deck is for him. He's great in other lists with ways to get more than one attack from him, but in this deck, he's likely just a one-pump chump that peaked in high school. Sorry to the starting quarterback, but you're getting sacked. And lastly, another new card gets cut in Sadistic Shellgate. This 5-mana sorcery is a lot like Council's Judgment, except as creature removal, which means it poses the same kind of issues. You may be able to destroy a creature of your choosing, but in a scenario where you're the problem at the table, most likely with the Lord of Pain in play, each opponent can just choose the same crappy token creature to blow up. That makes this a 5-mana 2-for-1 in some scenarios, and a 5-mana 4-for-1 in a best case scenario. I'd really just rather be using a sculptable board wipe to achieve the same thing. A quick shout out to a card that does work in this deck in Fear of Burning Alive. This 6-mana uncommon is a 4-4 that reads, when Fear of Burning Alive enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. Delirium. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, Fear of Burning Alive deals that amount of damage to target creature that player controls. So immediately, this 6-mana creature is 12 damage on enters, but if you have Delirium, you also immediately remove 3 creatures from play too. And every time the Lord of Pain triggers, you dome an opponent and get to remove a creature. The value on this is insane, and it's an uncommon from the main Duskmourn set. Expect this to be an all-star in a lot of lists. Now, if we wanted to add some real power to the deck, let's look at the upgrade. And the best place to start is damage doublers or triplers. Fiery Emancipation, City on Fire, or Uncivil Unrest. Slotting in anything that can increase the damage thrown around by the Lord is why you want it here. You need to turn up the clock on the game, and this is absolutely the way to do it, turning even small spells cast by your opponents into massive damage opportunities. This even includes gratuitous violence, as the Lord's trigger has him dealing the damage himself, making it damage from a creature and doubled by your enchantment. It's a great way to turn even a 3-mana spell cast from your opponents into a hit dealing huge damage. And naturally, this would include the Roller Crusher ride as well, from Duskmourn's main set. As long as you have Delirium, easy enough, this is not only an X spell to allow you to throw around a big first spell trigger, but also another damage doubling enchantment. And the true upside here, this doubles damage for you only. Unlike old damage doublers that doubled the damage that you and your opponents would be taking both, all of these options only care about your sources dealing damage. In this deck, it's perfect as it's not going to come back to bite you. Lastly, if you've got a lot of money to shell out on upgrading this, put Sheoldred the Apocalypse in. We have a bunch of draw punishing effects, and Sheoldred is the granddaddy of them here. Grandmother? Grandmother of them here. Dealing 2 to each opponent when they draw a card, and you gaining life when you draw a card just serves as a further way to outpace your opponent's life totals. It's expensive as hell, but it does work here. What do you think of this list out of the box? How does it hold up to the other Duskmourn Precons? Let me know in the comments, are you more excited to play Valgavoth or the Lord of Pain, and which one are you planning on putting in the lead of the deck? You can find my full list with upgrades in the description at my sponsor, MOXFIELD. MOXFIELD is the best deck building platform in the world and makes it easy to check the changes made to this list with their history function. Check out my cuts and ads all in one place, and while you're there, be sure to follow my profile to never miss a brew. And be sure to check out Card Conduit. If you're looking to sell your cards, ship them unsorted to Card Conduit, where they'll assess your cards and get you the best prices. They keep a cut of the sales and send you the rest. Easy. Don't mess with multiple buy lists again, or person-to-person sales for a single card at a time. Sell it all with Card Conduit today. And while you're here, be sure to check out these other videos on the channel. If you were inspired to brew today, you have to hit that subscribe button. And as always, folks, good luck and have fun.